Yeah.
So, oh, funny, the slides are doing something strange that the text is disappearing,
Nope,
but
nope.
this is our in-person community meeting for the Coastal Climate Resilience Collaborative. It was great to see everybody in person last month, and we're going to continue with virtual meetings for the rest of the year. Welcome, Caroline. I see you coming in. And we will start the meeting with a couple of presentations and then go into a little bit of workshopping of continuing our tasks. So I'll pass it over to Nikita to kick us off for the presentations.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting. Before we begin, I'm going to acknowledge that I'm joining today from Toronto or Toronto, the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples, including Mississaugas of the Credit, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Wendat. We've had the first snow this Sunday. So with the first snowfall having arrived last week, I acknowledge the changing seasons and the enduring connection of Indigenous peoples to this land. Thank you. And moving on to our presentations, we have two great speakers who will talk about neighborhood resilience programs in BC. Our first presenter is Michelle Hoar. She is the co-founder and project director for Hey Neighbour Collective. Michelle oversees the overall management of the collective, leading strategic partnerships, fundraising, funder relations, financial administration, housing industry engagement, and knowledge mobilization. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us, and I'll let you take over from here.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, really nice to have this invitation, and I'm excited to hear, particularly to have some Q&A time with everybody and see what particularly you're interested in. So bear with me while I start my slides here and get them into proper mode.
Michelle, while you're setting up your slides, I can share a couple of words that the focus of the collaborative is staff members coming together across the region, staff members that are responsible for climate resilience to work together on advancing implementation of climate resilience measures that are applicable to their various kind of coastal community contexts.
Great.
Hopefully that helps
That's
land you
awesome.
in addition. I know we talked a
Yeah,
while
no,
to invite you to these, so it's always good to have a refresher.
That's fantastic. And Stacy, will you let me know if the slides are displaying as they're meant to? Yeah, okay.
Great. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So thank you for that intro. As I said, as folks said, my name is Michelle. I'm the project director for Hey Neighbour Collective. Stacy, who you'll hear from directly after me, is the director of learning and evaluation. So we're the co-founding co-directors. And Hey Neighbour Collective started up in 2019, but its actual origin was as a pilot project at the City of Vancouver. So there was a social planner there working on the Healthy City strategy, and she was looking at some converging trends, one around increasing densification, because of course the City of Vancouver is kind of locked on all sides by a mountain, ocean, river, and other communities. So only way to grow is up. So more and more of us were going to be living in multi-unit housing. So she was looking at those trends and how also compact communities could support, sustainable cities and, denser kind of 15-minute living, all that. But then she was also looking at emerging local and global research around loneliness and social isolation, and that being on the increase. And there was some troubling early signs that locally people living in higher density housing were reporting a harder time feeling a sense of trust and belonging in their community or meeting friends. Now, this was very basic research. It didn't really triangulate for affordability, housing tenure, whether people owned or rented, how long they'd been in a community. But there was enough between that and stories people would tell about living in buildings and not knowing their neighbors for her to say, ooh, if we're going to build up and up and up, we want to make sure we're not building lonelier and lonelier. So she started commissioning some interesting research, and then ultimately did a pilot project in 2 market rental buildings. It was very simple. She hired a competent, experienced community development coordinator who then worked with the building managers to find residents that were willing to step forward as volunteers to put on events and initiatives with their neighbors. Very short pilot, but showed enough promise that the city and all the members of the advisory committee they assembled said, there's something here that we need to keep working on. The city didn't want to be the one to scale up the project, so Stacy, myself, and a few other people who had been on the advisory committee said, what if we can like lift this out of the city, make it something bigger? So we found a new home at the SFU Center for Dialogue and just enough funding to get going on something. And so what we did is we put together what's known as a collective impact project. So collective impact brings together a whole range of partners around a shared vision and a shared analysis of the problem they want to work on. And it kind of knits them together over time towards kind of common goals. So the partners that we bring together are all really interested in how to address loneliness and social isolation within the housing context. But over time, that's become really something a lot more. It's really started to be also about how neighborly social connections can make us more able to be prepared for and manage crises, whether those are the personal crises that affect us any day, or the collective ones that are coming about with increasing frequency from climate events or other types of natural disasters. And it's also it's also started to have a strong focus on how building neighborly social connections can help people to age in place better. So it's also addressing our demographic boom that we are within right now and wholly unprepared for. So this slide here shows some of the types of our partners. The ones in pink are partners that are kind of onboarding now. BC Centre for Disease Control is not yet a partner, but we're collaborating with them closely on a number of things. So we're quite specific when we talk about partnership. They have MOUs. There's very concrete things that we're doing together. And what a collective impact backbone team does, and Stacy and I are a big part of the backbone team, is it really looks at kind of keeping everybody knitted together through kind of constant communication. It's research and evaluation, really getting a good hold on what are we learning together and how can we prove that out. Knowledge mobilization, sharing what's working, peer learning, and then really starting to look at the systems and policy aspects of everything we're doing. So our vision at the collective is a future where more of Canada's multi-unit housing communities are age-friendly, socially connected, neighborly, health-promoting, and resilient. I want to leave lots of time for the Q&A and Stacy's presentation. So just very quickly, this is a bit of a shot from our theory of change. So we're really looking at like what major pieces are going to support that eventual vision. And so we're looking at engaged, safe, and empowered residents, proactive housing operators. So more and more housing operators actually embracing doing this kind of, and kind of like programming, but also best practices in kind of design changes in their buildings. Improvements in housing design policy and design, whatnot. There are kind of four main ways we do our work that I kind of already touched on. Stacy's going to give some great examples of scaling community building programs within housing. And then I'll talk a little bit about housing industry and policy engagement. So here's one example from work that we've done with Metro Vancouver. So back in December 2020, we were invited to put in a discussion paper for their consultations on the next regional growth strategy. So we did a whole big piece of research around, we called it social equity, social connectedness, and multi-unit housing in an age of public health and climate crises, because we were writing this right during the pandemic. So it was quite a heady time. We were digesting a lot of things. But two of the pieces that really came out for the local municipalities we talked to at that time were this idea of fostering design education and dialogue around best practices for sociable design for new multi-unit housing. and then advocating for funding and support of social connectedness programming. So there were already lots of examples of good programs and approaches for bringing neighbors together. And we wanted to see local governments advocating for that, supporting it when they could, even getting involved in the programming. And Stacy will give you some examples of that. So when Metro 2050 passed, and 3 years later, there's a little nugget in there that says that all the member jurisdictions must identify policies and actions that contribute to increased social connectedness in multi-unit housing. So, of course, this is amongst hundreds of other things that they're supposed to do, but it gave us a little policy window to work directly with local municipalities on their design guidelines around new multi-unit housing. So working with one of our key partners, Happy Cities, we've put together now 2 different toolkits. These are directed, primarily at planners, but also the architecture and design community, developers, and really anybody that is advocating for better, denser housing. And so we really want to look at not just we want to look at what we can do in existing buildings, what we can do around our new buildings to be more intentional about neighborly social connections and all the resilience and health benefits that can bring. And of course, if our built environments are well designed for this and foster it, then if programming comes in on top of that, that programming is going to have a much better chance of success because there are literally good, welcoming, safe spaces to do it in. So this is just a nice diagram that Happy Cities helped us come up with here. So again, this is just, some ideas of where local governments, regional governments can start to think about this. So in new buildings, you can be, guiding and incentivizing age-friendly sociable design. You can be supporting programming and partnership innovations. In existing buildings, you can be helping with retaining affordability, whether that's through acquisitions or renter protections. If there are retrofits or major building improvements happening, and there is a way for the city to support any kind of innovation there that helps to bring residents together or even slightly, alter interior or exterior spaces to be more conducive to that neighborly connection, that's great. And again, you can support programming in existing buildings. So with that, I will turn it over to Stacy. Stop sharing.
Michelle?
Yes.
Maybe before I jump, do you want me just to launch in, or are there any quick questions?
Yeah, that's true. We could do Q&A now on mine, or we can leave it all to the end. I know I breezed through that all very fast, so.
Perfect.
Thanks, Michelle. Maybe we can do the Q&A in the end so people have time to think
Digest.
about questions they might have, and then you and Stacy can take up Q&A together.
Perfect.
Thanks, Michelle. Stacy, you can launch your presentation, and I'll just give a quick overview of your role at Hey Neighbour Collective and building resilient neighborhoods.
Sure, sounds great.
Yeah, thank you. So our next speaker here is Stacy Barter, and presenting on building resilient neighborhoods. Stacy is the executive director of Building Resilient Neighborhoods, where she leads and facilitates community resilience initiative, and she also serves as the director of learning and evaluation for Hey Neighbour Collective, as Michelle mentioned. Her current work centers on neighborhood-based engagement, climate and health-related public engagement, and fostering community resilience and cross-sector collaboration. Thanks, Stacy. I'll let you take over from here.
All right, thanks so much. Yeah, thank you. It's really nice to meet everyone, and I'm happy to share about some of the more specific on the ground examples of the work we've been doing in collaboration with Hey Neighbour Collective. So Michelle shared that diagram at the beginning of who makes up the Hey Neighbour Collective. So I kind of wear 2 hats. One is supporting the collective as a whole, and the other is as in my role as a demonstration partner within the collective. So we have a number of partner organizations who have been for several years now testing out different approaches to building social connectedness and resilience in multi-unit housing. And we started some work through Building Resilient Neighborhoods actually prior to Hey Neighbour Collective existing. But the collective has served as sort of a platform for us to scale this work that we've been doing. So I'll just share a little bit about building resilient neighborhoods. We're a really small nonprofit that started in Victoria. Our focus is on community resilience. We basically were a bunch of community developers who had worked for many, many years in the space of community resilience. And we started in 2012. We wanted to test frameworks and models of community resilience that we had been working on in rural communities in a more urban context, and to look at what are the factors that make communities more resilient at the neighborhood scale. So we started in Victoria. Most of the stuff we've done, we incubate in Victoria, but over the years, we've now been scaling some of the work and approaches that we've developed to other parts of BC. Really, the foundation that's evolved through our many, many years of work on community resilience and neighborhood resilience is what Michelle was speaking to. It's the idea of social infrastructure being the cornerstone of community resilience at the neighborhood level. So having connected, prepared, and caring neighbors, and that connection with those folks that are right next door, building really, really strong social networks, we think make one of the biggest differences in terms of communities and neighborhoods being more resilient. So that's really where we've put our effort. As a very small nonprofit, we've had to sort of choose where do we focus. And so most of our efforts have been at that kind of micro scale. How do we strengthen connections between immediate neighbors as a way of making communities more resilient? We have a bunch of different programs. I'm going to talk mostly today about Connect and Prepare, but really, we have a few different pathways, and they focus on these three pillars. How do we get people more connected? How do we get people more prepared? And how do we foster a culture of caring where there's mutual support and we're looking out for each other as neighbors when stuff comes our way, which we know it is all the time. So I threw this in, not to date myself, but this is my origin story. I grew up in a small rural
Cute, Stacy.
I know I was cute back then. This is me and my buddy bringing flowers to our neighbor. And I grew up in a small community where we helped each other out. You know, we weren't necessarily best friends with our neighbors, but when stuff happened, the community would rally and support each other. So I remember one of my friends' house burnt down when I was in elementary school. The whole community got together, and of course, fundraised, fed, clothed, and ultimately rebuilt that family's home. So the question that we've been sort of working with for years is how do we get that kind of mindset, that kind of culture in more of an urban context? We hear a lot of times with folks we work with this kind of yearning for that kind of connection. But we don't see it a lot. And as Michelle was saying, the trends are actually kind of going the other way when we look at what's happening in many of our communities. So the work that we're doing, as Michelle already sort of framed up, we're trying to strengthen social connections for all kinds of emergencies. So the story of Anne, who is an older person living in Victoria, shared her neighbor always brings her newspapers every day. She saw that Anne hadn't taken her newspaper inside. Because she knew Anne, she was able to discover that Anne had fallen and needed assistance. Many of us, though, are living in spaces, especially in multi-unit housing, where we don't even know our neighbor. So how do we get to know each other better so we know who needs help and we kind of look out for each other a bit more? How do we have stronger connections? So these kind of day-to-day emergencies, the personal emergencies that turn up when, the daycare calls and the daycare is closed, can the neighbor step in and maybe help out with babysitting? But also the bigger thing that's motivating us, of course, and this is the most relevant, I think, for this group, is the climate emergencies and the climate context we're living in. And I think what we've seen through our work, we've been at this for many, many years, but in 2021, when the heat dome hit, it was a super wake-up call for everyone around the province, with the number of deaths, 619 deaths, and the majority of those being older people who lived alone. And many of those, we believe, could have been prevented if there was someone who knew them, was looking out for them, and was in regular contact with them. So what we've seen in our work, particularly with Connect and Prepare, is since that time, there is a tremendous recognition of the importance of that the importance of social connections, but also being very close to home, so that those social connections are really like our neighbors are our first responders, and how do we foster that more? Michelle told the origin story of Hey Neighbour Collective. This is a slide from our recent symposium that we held last year, where we were kind of talking about how our work has evolved within the collective, and how in 2019, when we started, it sort of felt like a nice to have when we talked about social infrastructure and social connectedness. People were like, oh, it's nice. It helps people be healthier and less lonely. But now people have come to recognize it's actually not just a nice to have, it's actually life-saving. And it's critical to build this kind of resilience, especially in the climate context that we're in. So we see this as a multi-solver, social connectedness kind of being a cornerstone of resilience for people to be safer, healthier, more prepared, happier, living a better life, but also prepared for all the things that come our way. And that really has been what's motivated our work around Connect and Prepare. So Connect and Prepare is a particular program we started in 2018 with the City of Victoria's Emergency Management Department. They were wanting to engage and develop a neighborhood emergency management program, but we're struggling with it. And so it was a really sweet partnership to kind of bring together our community engagement and community development expertise with their emergency management expertise. And so we co-developed this program, which really is focused at the very micro scale, bringing neighbors together to get prepared together. And so it focuses on these pillars of getting prepared, but through social connectedness. And I always say what I love about Connect and Prepare is that there's two gateways in. Some people are motivated because they want to get connected, and then by stealth we get them prepared. And some people really aren't that interested in connecting, but they want to get prepared, and by stealth we get them connected. And through the process of a series of workshops with groups of neighbors right where they live, we're trying to foster this kind of culture of neighbors helping each other out and really doing it together. It's based on what we're seeing in research all over, that in disasters or big crises, despite the fact that most of our emergency preparedness efforts tend to focus on technical solutions and all the kit and the gear and the stuff that we need to be prepared, which is important. This is an image from the tsunami in Japan and some research that was done on like who fared better in response to that crisis. And the research showed that it actually was the places with stronger social networks, and that is what made the difference. So the title of this blog article was Social Ties, Not Just Sandbags. It's actually the social connections that at the end of the day make a bigger difference. This is like longer time ago, the Chicago heat wave in 1995, comparing two neighborhoods, basically showing the communities that were well connected, that knew who to look out for, whose doors to knock on, fared much better than, there were fewer fatalities than in the neighborhood where they didn't have those strong connections. So the whole kind of ethos of Connect and Prepare is that it's who's in your kit, it's not just what's in your kit. And we need to start breaking down the barriers of knowing who's right next door. And instead of focusing just on the big events and just focusing at the household level, we're trying to bring neighbors together to focus on collective preparedness. And by the act of coming together, getting more connected, but also getting more inspired. Emergency preparedness, climate resilience, I don't need to tell you all this, you all know this, can sometimes be a bit of a downer and can be fear, it can create fear. And so the act of bringing people together, I think, can be quite empowering and actually hopeful. And so we're working on emergency preparedness, but also through building these connections, trying to not only focus on the short-term big event response, but building up the foundation of resilience that will help us in these kind of ongoing stresses as well. So with things like food security, isolation and health. And so we talk about this being like resilience muscles that we're trying to build up that'll help us out when things are challenging. So I'll just share a little bit about how the program works, and then a little bit about what we have planned this year, which includes some work on the Sunshine Coast we're really excited about. So I mentioned already, it's at the micro scale in apartment buildings or blocks or like little rural areas. You know, sometimes rural areas don't have neighborhoods defined, but kind of clusters of who's closest. And we bring in facilitators to work with those groups of neighbors through a series of workshops. And the focus is really on building their capacity. So it's very resident directed. It's about, as I said, getting connected, getting a plan together, but really that collective focus on preparedness. So they come together, they learn about why doing this together and why neighbor connections are particularly important for preparedness and resilience. There's a process of assessing strengths and vulnerabilities at that really local level, like in our building. Where are we prepared? Where are we connected? Where are we not? What do we need to pay attention to? Oh, we have no, we have no water system in place, or we have no idea what happens when the power goes out, or whatever the case may be. We then share a bunch of ideas about what people can do together at that small scale with neighbors. And then they do projects. So they choose what they want to do and select projects that they want to work on to get more connected and prepared, and implement those, usually with some support and often some very small micro grants. So some of the projects that we see are things like skills sharing, buddy systems, setting up communication networks. Often groups of neighbors will purchase shared emergency supplies rather than focusing on everyone buying it for themselves. Sometimes, there's a focus on both long-term resilience as well as the short term. So we've seen some really cool food security projects that have come out of these as well. So quite diverse and very much led by the residents. And this is an example from one of the buildings we worked in on our very first pilot in Victoria, which was a low-rise of seniors with disabilities. And they started with a focus on healthy food distribution in the building. So they realized as low-income seniors that there was a real issue around food security. And they partnered with a local food distribution organization to bring food into the building. And through that process, they kind of built up their confidence around community organizing and then participated in Connect and Prepare. They ultimately ended up developing a system of shared emergency supplies and a buddy system. And they got a small grant where they developed grab and go emergency kits for everyone in the building because they couldn't afford that themselves. But it was all led by the residents themselves. So you can see this quote here that I think what stood out for them was they went in feeling like they couldn't do things. They left feeling empowered and like, we actually have a lot of abilities and a lot of strength to be able to respond to things that are challenging for us. I'll just share a couple more examples. This is from work we've been doing with BC Housing, where in some of their directly managed sites, they've set up systems of floor connectors. So these are residents who agree to be connectors on their floor to help their neighbors understand how to respond in different kinds of emergencies, get more connected, learn about emergency protocols, and just engage with their neighbors. In this particular building, the folks we were working with had a lot of challenges going on in their lives, and we worked with them to design information that they felt would be helpful for their neighbors. So they realized, we just had a fire. Nobody knew what to do. There were people in wheelchairs left on the third floor. No one was responding. So we worked through a process of defining what information did people want to know, setting up a system with door hangers and where information could be easily shared and identified about who might need help. And really, it was just about building that culture of helping and awareness of who needs help. And again, the process of doing this together, I think, was incredibly empowering. They also did a grab and go kit party, and these folks said, really the process of getting to work together, again, is what made the big difference. In some of our sites in Victoria, we've had some really cool partnerships with an organization called Neighbour Lab, where we've developed neighbor hubs. This is a placemaking project in one of the streets we worked on in Victoria, where we worked with Neighbour Lab is a great design studio, and they designed this very cool placemaking project that's a bench for neighbors to be able to sit together on the block. but it stores emergency supplies. There's a solar panel for emergency charging of your phones. There's a community bulletin board where they can share information together. And again, it's a cool ongoing project that the neighbors can use, but the process of working together to design that, to choose what supplies go in the bench, got them to know each other really better. And I actually ran into, this was several years ago, I just ran into these folks a few weeks ago, and they said they're still going strong. Particularly the women on the block, they've named themselves the Lovely Ladies of Leonard, and they get together every month and have all kinds of activities that they have going on, including caring for this bench in the garden there. That was our pilot with the neighbor hubs, and then we partnered with some of the other departments at the city. That was funded through a small grant through City of Victoria's Neighborhood Grants program. And then we teamed up with their transportation department, and they were interested in bringing these hubs to some of their other capital infrastructure projects on some of the transportation corridors. So these are some examples of some larger, more neighborhood scale hubs that have been built. Again, they have the same features that they all store emergency supplies. The community's engaged in defining what goes in there. You can see the solar panel there. There's some really cool designs as well. So we started in Victoria with our partnership with Hey Neighbour Collective. We started scaling Connect and Prepare in 2022. It was our first foray into, okay, what would it look like if we took this program elsewhere? So we partnered with 3 other municipalities, City of Vancouver, North Vancouver, and New Westminster, and have really learned a lot. Now we've kind of moved to this train the trainer model where we, instead of doing direct delivery ourselves, we're actually training municipalities and community-based organizations to deliver the program themselves. We've since then worked with several other communities and community partners. This is our cohort that we're just launching for this year. So you can see a number of place-based organizations who are the folks who are really leading the facilitation with residents, usually in partnership with local governments. And we're very excited. We're this year for the first time working with 2 health authorities, with Vancouver Coastal Health and Fraser Health, and then often with housing operators as well, to deliver the program. In terms of this cohort here, we're very excited to share that we'll be doing some work on the Sunshine Coast. Right now, we've been in collaboration with Vancouver Coastal Health and the Regional District. I am sure they would be very excited to partner and engage with the municipalities as well. And we're just at early stages, but really excited to be bringing this to a bit more of a rural context. So we're excited to learn from that as well. So I will stop there, and I hope that shares a little bit maybe of a picture of some of the on-the-ground work that Hey Neighbour is supporting.
Thanks, Stacy. It was a great presentation, lots to learn, and it's really inspiring. And Michelle's also shared some great resources in the chat. So yeah, feel free to check them out, and we're open for questions or any comments.
I'm curious if the North Van folks knew of this going on in your neighborhoods, and if it's, you know, activated. Adam, I know you previously kind of brought up the extreme heat in multi-unit residential as a topic for us to explore what we can do around within this collaborative. I wonder if you knew about this program, and I don't know if Stacy has anything more to add in terms of kind of the context and who worked in the North Van, if it was a particular neighborhood or building.
The partnership in North Vancouver was with the City of North Van.
Got it.
But we did also partner with North Shore Emergency Management in that work, and North Shore Resources and Silver Harbor. Silver Threads is Victoria. Silver Harbor is yeah, and the focus there, they chose to focus heavily on buildings with high proportions of older adults and seniors. They actually worked with the fire department to map and look at who the frequent flyers were in terms of calls and needs. So they really were prioritizing lower income buildings with seniors and primarily low rise walk-ups where there were often like mobility challenges. Yeah.
I think Stacy, did New West and Vancouver not also focus on low-income seniors? I think that was actually a thread with all three partner municipalities, right? Because it was coming out, a lot of the impetus was coming out of the pandemic, and we were basically following the numbers
And
in
the
terms
heat.
of the urgency. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Carolyn.
Yeah, I couldn't help but just jump in and say these were such great presentations. It's so inspiring and really, really critical work. And I'm so grateful for you for sharing them with us this morning. It really resonated with me personally. I have an aging parent who lives on her own, and during the heat dome, I actually extracted her from her home, and she was not doing well at all. And
Yeah.
I remember seeing a news story which prompted me to check in on her. And indeed, it was not looking good for her. And so this is really life-saving work that's being done here. And love the reference to how it was done with the fire department looking at calls. I know our fire department does annual checks. They have fire captains in all of the multifamily buildings, so that's a wonderful contact point, potential, partnership opportunity if your fire department does those kinds of things. I know at one point when I was previously at the city of North Vancouver, which is predominantly multifamily, there was a lot of work that we did looking at retrofits where we actually partnered with the fire department around, trying to better understand the building stock. And, I'd love to, look at maybe we know that, more recent construction, we still actually, even not that long ago, we're building multifamily homes with no air conditioning. In fact, we had a project go through recently, maybe the project went through 3 or 4 years ago, where the rental portion had baseboard heaters and the strata portion had heat pumps, and it drove me nuts. And that's where
What?
yeah. This was not
Oh,
that
that
long
should
ago.
not pass. That should not pass.
That's what I thought.
I'm sorry.
That
That's
was
terrible.
early on in Adam and I's tenure in the team. And but honestly, it was before the heat dome, I think. Anyway, or
Just so
maybe I can't remember if it
emblematic,
was
though.
before or after, but it was really, really challenging. And that's what really led us to our climate ready building rezoning policy, where you are required, or not, we're not required, it's a rezoning policy, but you're sort of expected to provide cooling for residential spaces. So and it looks as if, based on our response to some of the provincial housing legislation, it looks as if we are still going to be able to retain that policy. We were a little bit worried that we wouldn't retain that opportunity, just because the province was really moving us more towards pre-zoning, and we would no longer have that ability. But of course, there's also been the change in the code as well at the same time. So anyway, there's some good things that are happening. One
Yeah.
thing that comes to mind, I remember at one point we were thinking about, when I was at the city, we found so many stratas, new stratas for new buildings, didn't have the tools or the information that they might need. A lot of them were new to even being in a strata, and didn't know a lot about how their buildings functioned. And we thought about, I remember, I don't think we ever executed on it, but we were thinking about a guide that we would make for new residents, for new construction. And this seems like an opportune contact point, potentially, where there could be a guide, or something that could be distributed to try and get those new residents right at the get-go. And just another suggestion, I guess. But yeah, really incredible work and very inspiring. Thank you.
That's a fun idea, Carolyn. And I think what we're really trying to do too is try to change the kind of culture and mindset in the housing sector, so that more and more rental housing landlords, whether they're market or non-market, as well as, strata organizations, are actually thinking about how they can support and kind of enable this work. Because leaving it up to residents to catalyze this stuff and keep anything going is tricky, right?
Yeah.
Like, to really kind of maximize the potential, you need actual kind of support at the higher level, so that this stuff works and isn't just being sustained by one or two volunteers, because that's fragile.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looks like Dave has a question.
Yeah, thanks. first off, I want to reiterate the awesome presentations. Like I'm looking at this, and I mean, none of this is rocket science, but it is so important, and it just takes the initiative to get going and doing this sort of stuff. I do have a question, but I have a comment. I don't know, I guess it was 5 years ago, I did a short stint working at BC Housing. I was actually there during the heat dome, and we went to a building on Kingsway Avenue, 1970s building, 18 stories. I believe the number, I believe in that one building, 5 people died. And that really hit me. Like,
that's a lot.
yes.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean, the west facing wall of that building was like an oven.
Yeah.
And we went in there afterwards to actually test window film that helps reduce, heat transfer. And it was sort of a stopgap measure that was fully implemented. But just seeing the importance of the floor connectors, Stacy just talked about. Like, again, it's not rocket science, but it's so important. And the building manager, he basically said he just, he can't know everyone in the building. He said, if I knew who to check on, this would not have happened. And it's incredibly important, this sort of thing. So first off, thanks for sharing all this. I wasn't actually fully aware of your organization, and I've made a bunch of notes here. So, and just so you're aware, I actually work with the provincial government, and I run a team that runs what we call the Local Government Climate Action Program. I'm going to make sure that everyone knows about this too. So
we'd be happy to present. That'd be a fun opportunity for us too. So let's connect about that.
Yeah, I'll figure out how to make that happen.
Awesome.
I had a question for Stacy. I love those the locations like out in the I think it was the Leonard Street community.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of curious about how, to be blunt, have there been any issues with things like vandalism or taking of the supplies? And how are the supplies that are there, how are they accessed, or how are they available? Like, are they under lock and key is what I'm wondering.
They are, and yes, there have been challenges. So yeah, we actually, when we initially stocked the Leonard Street bench, it wasn't as secure as it is now, and the initial supplies were stolen. They've been replaced. We have a new system, so it is definitely a challenge. The other thing that's been a challenge has actually been the solar stuff. Yeah, it's like an ongoing challenge of how to make that secure enough.
Yep.
The way that it works, so they're a little bit different, the Leonard Street one compared to the other examples, which are in more public spaces. I mean, Leonard Street is public in that it's a public boulevard, but it really was that block of residents that designed and steward that site. So they have a system. I actually can't remember, but there's a system on the street, like 3 of them have the keys or something like that. Whereas the other ones are in more public space. And they're actually managed by the city. However, we do have arrangements with one of them. There still was a group of neighboring residents that were heavily involved in the design, and they have the keys and the access to the supplies. And in the other one, it's right next door to the community association, so they are the ones that steward that, in addition to the city.
Yeah, great, thank you.
It is a challenge though, and yeah. It's ongoing in terms of security. Yeah.
That's good to know, because that's one of the features we're looking at for the infrastructure measure piece of like trying to make resilience hubs in some of the communities like Gibsons and Bowen have just kind of, we've put a grant application. We'll see if the funding comes through to activate a neighborhood scale, kind of in nature spots. These types of hubs, and those benches were something that Bowen Island has them as well. I don't think it was through you guys. Maybe it was like their own kind of internal community effort, but a very similar idea. And yeah, the pictures of what you shared, we had come across it, and we're really interested to hear more. So thank you for sharing about those.
Yeah, the inspiration actually came from, I think it was from Japan, where I think Japan is like so ahead of the game in terms of a lot of this type of stuff. But they actually have benches that turn into barbecues. So in the event of an emergency, you can have a barbecue.
Fantastic. You don't need a food kitchen. Yeah, I like this idea of bringing it outside too, right? A lot of times we expect our buildings to provide everything, but, you know, taking it one more scale of like having our communities provide everything, so that nature is also a part of that, and that, you know, the transformable bench is also a part of that, etc. It's really cool. Yeah, and I want to just take a moment and deeply thank both Stacy and Michelle for sharing your time and your knowledge with the group, and also credit it back to the group. It was from this group's interest that we reached out to you. So, you know, early on, like back in March, we went through what's going on in the region that you would like to hear more about, that we can maybe replicate and scale kind of in different communities that aren't already accessing it. And so it makes sense that some of the names of the communities were in your presentations, and that this is exactly why, it's so beneficial to learn from each other and kind of scale the existing great work that's in the region.
Thank you.
And it just, would be like very happy to hear from any of you if you want to have a follow-up conversation or, you know, another presentation. You know, Hey Neighbor is, you know, we're in a growing pain moment where there's so much opportunity that we actually have to kind of reconfigure our governance structures to kind of accommodate that the opportunities are going on, and fundraising to accompany all of that. But we're always eager to hear what people are interested in, what kind of needs they have, and how we might potentially support that. And a lot of that happens through kind of collaborating on grant opportunities. So when we helped Connect and Prepare to scale to the other 3 communities, we did that through kind of coming together, like all together, and saying, okay, where can we find the money for this? And so the expectation was that municipalities would kick in, you know, a certain amount, that they would, you know, find a little bit of money in their couch cushions, some in-kind time, some, you know, some money for those shared emergency supplies, but that together we would go for larger grants to make the whole thing possible. Because one of the biggest challenges in all of this work is that organizations like Building Resilient Neighborhoods, or some of the other groups we partner with, they're just always battling really insufficient episodic funding. So it's very, very hard to scale these programs and make them at all sustainable when you're getting little chunks of money only for 12 months at a time. It's hard to sustain staff, to build the capacity. So I think if we want this kind of work to grow, we have to work on it together and be finding those more sustainable mechanisms for keeping it going, because it is life-saving. And I think it does ultimately, if we have very connected neighbors who are helping each other, that takes a lot of pressure off formal response systems and emergency systems. And I know doing the work you do, you all feel that, right? When there's a crisis, you can't be everywhere all at once.
Yeah, and I think what I would add in this is, obviously I'm biased, but the technical, the infrastructure piece, of course, is critical.
Yeah.
But unless that's accompanied with social mobilization and community development and good community engagement, I don't think it's ever going to be enough. And unfortunately, that community engagement, that deep community development work, it takes resources, and it doesn't just happen. So we're really excited about this work we're doing with place-based organizations, and yet we haven't quite cracked the nut yet, where they tend to be heavily under-resourced organizations. So like it is a bit of a challenge of how do we scale this work? How do we embed it?
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we can all do a round of applause and gratitude to our presenters. We'll transition.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Great to have you with us. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, and of course, just echoing Michelle, please feel free to reach out if anyone wants to follow up if you see any opportunities in your community.
Yeah, if it's okay with you, we can share your contact along.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think
okay, have a great day.
We are collecting the if you're open to it, we can also share your slides along. And
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll send those to you. Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Nice to meet everybody. Bye.
Have a great day.
you.
Okay, whoever